The company called it a team-building retreat, but everyone in the office knew it was really 3 days of forced smiles, awkward trust exercises, and pretending you enjoyed spending your weekend with coworkers. For Ethan Brooks, there was only one reason he almost declined the invitation: Ava Carter. Ava was his biggest rival. They competed over every client, every presentation, every promotion. If Ethan closed a deal worth $50,000, Ava somehow landed one worth $60,000. If Ava earned praise from the regional director, Ethan answered with record-breaking quarterly numbers. Their rivalry had become legendary throughout the company. Some employees placed bets on who would become the next department manager. Neither of them ever admitted it, but the competition had stopped being fun months ago. The mountain resort looked peaceful, surrounded by pine trees and a sparkling lake that reflected the afternoon sun. Everyone admired the scenery while dragging their luggage toward the cabins. Then the event coordinator clapped her hands. "We've had a small booking issue. Some cabins only have one room left, so a few people will have to share." Ethan barely listened until he heard his name. Ethan Brooks, with Ava Carter. The entire group burst into laughter. "You've got to be kidding," Ethan muttered. Ava folded her arms, clearly just as horrified. "There has to be another option." "I'm afraid not," the coordinator said apologetically. 20 minutes later, they stood silently inside cabin 7. It wasn't terrible. Actually, it was worse. 1 bedroom. 1 bathroom. 1 queen-sized bed. Ava stared at it for several seconds before dropping her suitcase onto the floor. "Well," she sighed, "1 bed. Don't make it awkward." Ethan blinked. "I wasn't planning to." "Good. Good." Neither moved. Finally, Ethan grabbed a blanket from the closet. "I'll take the couch." She looked toward the tiny love seat. "That thing? You'll wake up unable to walk. I've survived quarterly audits. I'll survive a couch." For the first time in years, Ava laughed. It caught Ethan completely off guard. It wasn't the sarcastic laugh she used during meetings. It was genuine. Later that evening, a thunderstorm rolled over the mountains. Heavy rain pounded against the cabin windows while lightning flashed across the dark sky. The resort briefly lost power, leaving only the fireplace casting warm orange light across the room. Without phones or laptops, silence settled between them. "So," Ava finally asked, "why do you hate me?" Ethan frowned. "I don't hate you. You've argued with me in every meeting for 2 years. Because you're always trying to prove me wrong." She shook her head slowly. "I argue because you're usually right, and I don't like losing." That wasn't the answer he expected. She stared into the fire before continuing. "My father spent 30 years working at one company. When layoffs came, loyalty meant nothing. Since then I've believed that if I'm not the best, I'm replaceable." Ethan looked down. "My dad owned a small business. It failed when I was 16. We lost our house. Ever since then, I've treated every promotion like it's survival." The rivalry suddenly made sense. Neither of them had been fighting each other. They'd both been fighting fear. Rain continued tapping against the roof. After several quiet moments, Ava smiled faintly. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "I thought you were arrogant. I thought you were impossible." She laughed again. "And now?" "Now I think you're exhausted." "So are you." The lights flickered back on. Neither noticed. Instead, they spent the next 2 hours talking, not about sales numbers or promotions, but about childhood dreams, embarrassing college stories, favorite movies, and the strange pressure of always pretending to have everything under control. The walls they'd built over years of competition quietly disappeared. When bedtime finally arrived, Ethan reached for his blanket again. Ava stopped him. "The couch really is terrible." He looked at the bed. You sure? She rolled her eyes dramatically. It's a queen bed, Ethan. We're adults. He chuckled. Fair point. They lay on opposite sides, leaving an almost ridiculous amount of space between them. After several minutes, Ava spoke into the darkness. You know. If we'd actually talked 2 years ago, we probably would have saved ourselves hundreds of pointless arguments. And a lot of coffee-fueled stress. Ethan smiled at the ceiling. Probably. Outside, the storm finally passed, leaving only the soft sound of wind through the pine trees. Tomorrow they would return to the office. They would still compete. They would still challenge each other's ideas. But something had changed. Their rivalry no longer felt like a battle. It felt like respect. Sometimes the strongest teams aren't built during trust falls or corporate workshops. Sometimes all it takes is one unexpected room assignment, one honest conversation, and one sentence that breaks years of misunderstanding. One bed, she had said. Don't make it awkward. Instead, it became the night that changed everything. The next morning, sunlight poured through the cabin windows, washing away every trace of the previous night's storm. Ethan woke first, surprised to realize he had actually slept well. Across the bed, Ava was still asleep, her usually confident expression replaced by something calm and almost vulnerable. For the first time since they'd met, he didn't see a rival. He simply saw another person carrying invisible burdens. He quietly slipped out of bed and headed to the resort cafe. When he returned a few minutes later, he carried 2 cups of coffee. Ava blinked awake as the aroma filled the room. You remembered, she said, taking the cup. Extra cream. No sugar. She looked genuinely surprised. I didn't know you noticed. I notice more than you think. An awkward silence followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It felt different, lighter. After breakfast, everyone gathered outside for the day's biggest team-building challenge. The organizers divided employees into pairs for an obstacle course that required trust, communication, and cooperation. Without even checking the list, Ethan already knew who his partner would be. Sure enough, the coordinator smiled. Ethan and Ava, you're together again. The group erupted with teasing applause. The first challenge required one teammate to wear a blindfold while the other guided them across a field filled with hidden obstacles. I'll go first, Ethan offered. Ava tied the blindfold around his eyes. Ready? As I'll ever be. For a moment, he hesitated. Trusting Ava felt strange after years of treating her like the competition. 3 steps forward, she instructed calmly. He obeyed. Now 1 step left. He followed her voice. Stop. There's a log in front of you. Her directions were steady, patient, and precise. Not once did she joke or deliberately make things harder. Within minutes, Ethan crossed the course without touching a single obstacle. When the blindfold came off, he smiled. I guess I owe you one. You definitely do. Then it was Ava's turn. She tied on the blindfold, folded her arms, and grinned nervously. If you walk me into a tree, I'm reporting you to HR. No promises. She laughed. As Ethan guided her across the course, he realized something unexpected. Protecting her mattered more than winning. Every instruction came carefully. Small step. Watch your footing. You're doing great. When she reached the finish line safely, she removed the blindfold and looked directly at him. You never let me stumble. I wasn't going to. Several co-workers exchanged curious glances. The legendary office rivals suddenly looked more like partners. After lunch came the final activity, a strategy challenge where each pair had to solve a complicated business simulation under a strict time limit. Normally, Ethan and Ava would have fought over every decision. Instead, they listened. She analyzed risks. He spotted opportunities. She corrected his blind spots. He strengthened her ideas. Within 30 minutes, they finished first. Even the company director seemed impressed. I've never seen two people with such different styles work together this well. Neither of them answered. Because they were wondering the same thing. Why had they spent 2 years trying to beat each other instead of building something together? That evening, as everyone celebrated around a bonfire beside the lake, Ethan stood quietly watching the flames dance into the night sky. Ava walked over carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. No coffee this time. He accepted one with a smile. Thanks. They stood in comfortable silence until she finally spoke. When we get back. He looked at her. Let's stop treating every meeting like a battlefield. He nodded slowly. I'd like that. She extended her hand. Partners? Ethan looked at it for a moment before shaking it firmly. Partners. Neither of them noticed the amused smile spreading across their coworkers' faces. Everyone else had already realized what they were only beginning to understand. Sometimes the person who challenges you the most isn't your enemy. Sometimes they're the one who helps you become your best self. Monday morning felt strangely unfamiliar. The office looked exactly the same, the buzzing printers, ringing phones, hurried footsteps, and the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the break room. Yet something had changed. For the first time in 2 years, Ethan didn't walk into the weekly sales meeting expecting a fight. Ava was already there, arranging her presentation slides. She glanced up as he entered. Morning. Morning. The room fell silent. Several coworkers exchanged puzzled looks. One even whispered, did they just greet each other? When the meeting began, the department manager announced exciting news. Our biggest client, Harrison Technologies, is considering a 5-year partnership worth nearly $10 million. Whoever leads this project will almost certainly become our next department manager. The room buzzed with excitement. Everyone expected Ethan and Ava to immediately compete for the opportunity. Instead, Ethan spoke first. I'd like Ava to lead the client presentation. The manager blinked. And I'd like Ethan to handle negotiations, Ava added without hesitation. Now the room was completely silent. The manager leaned back in his chair. You two want to work together? They looked at one another before answering in perfect unison. Yes. Over the next 3 weeks, the office witnessed something no one thought possible. Ethan's calm leadership balanced Ava's creative thinking. She caught details he overlooked. He solved problems before they became crises. Neither cared who received the credit anymore. The client noticed the chemistry immediately. During the final presentation, Harrison Technologies' CEO smiled. I've met plenty of sales teams, he said, but very few partners who trust each other this much. The contract was signed that afternoon. It became the largest deal in company history. A week later, the entire department gathered once again in the conference room. The regional director stood at the front with a small envelope. I originally planned to promote one department manager. He paused dramatically. But after seeing what genuine teamwork accomplished, we've created a new leadership structure. He smiled. Congratulations. Co-managers Ethan Brooks and Ava Carter. Applause erupted throughout the room. Ethan looked at Ava. She laughed in disbelief. We actually did it. We did. After the celebration, they walked toward the parking lot together. The evening sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. You know, Ethan said, unlocking his car, it's funny. What is? If someone had told me a month ago that sharing one bed with my biggest rival would completely change my life, I would have reported them to HR, Ava finished, laughing. So would I. She started walking toward her car, then suddenly stopped. Ethan? Yeah? Would you, maybe like to have dinner sometime? He smiled. As co-workers? She raised an eyebrow. I was hoping as something more. For a moment, the busy parking lot seemed to disappear. All Ethan could hear was his own heartbeat. I'd like that. Her smile was brighter than any promotion either of them had ever earned. 6 months later, another company retreat was announced. The same coordinator greeted everyone with an embarrassed expression. I'm terribly sorry, she said. We're short on rooms again. The office burst into laughter before she even finished. One coworker shouted, just put Ethan and Ava together again. Another added, that's company tradition now. Ava slipped her hand into Ethan's. He grinned. This time, we should probably ask one question first. She tilted her head. What question? He held up a small velvet box. Will you marry me? Her eyes filled with happy tears before he had even opened it. Yes. The entire team erupted into cheers as he placed the ring on her finger. Months later, at their wedding reception, the department manager stood to give a toast. I've attended many team-building events over the years, he said. Most people return with stronger communication skills. He looked at the newlyweds and smiled. But these two came back with something far more valuable. Each other. The guests applauded as Ethan and Ava shared their first dance. Neither of them could stop smiling. Sometimes, life changes through grand plans. Sometimes, it changes because of a mistake on a room assignment sheet. A single bed had forced two rivals to lower their walls. One honest conversation had turned competition into respect. Respect had become friendship. Friendship had become love. And love had become the greatest partnership either of them would ever build. The end.